Cincinnati's ready for the Big 12. It was time for them.
I am fired up.
It's a blessing to be able to be in this league with y'all, putting on for UC.
Cincinnati, a basketball school for...
And there he goes. Touchdown, Bearcats.
Raquama again. Another slam inside.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the GoBeercats podcast, part of the Catskeller Social Club. I'm your host, Brandon, and as you can see here right from the jump, we are joined by the representative, the delegate, if you will, of all of Iowa State Cyclones Nation, Levi, from Wide Right and Natty Lite. So welcome into the GoBeercats podcast. How's it going?
Good. Thanks for having me.
I'm super excited to learn all that we can about Ames, Iowa today.
I love talking about Iowa. The Ames, state of Iowa, whatever we got. I love talking about it. I'm a
perfect
guy.
Absolutely. So, before we get too far into it, this is the GoBeercats podcast. So before we start off, we like to start off with this thing called Time for a Beer. This one I'm drinking today is from Streetside Brewery, one of the best in the city. This one's called Raspberry Beret. Very nice, colorful raspberry Berliner Weiss here. Of course, this is brought to you by the Delhi Liquor Store, one of our new sponsors, really the first sponsor of our show. They have you covered not only with a great beer selection, with new beer drops happening almost every day, but they have everything you need from tailgating to partying, whether it's bourbon, cigars, wine, or just a beer on your way home. Check out the Delhi Liquor Store. Levi, I'm drinking something kind of not necessarily in my wheelhouse. You sipping on anything while we talk this evening?
I'm drinking. See, Cincinnati fans are going to get used to, like I said, to the Big 12 and Midwest land grant schools, which, if you guys aren't aware, we like to drink beer in massive quantities to the point where it's like an actual thing. And I'm sipping on what is a beautiful craft beer from the Midwest named Busch Light. It goes down really easy. Couldn't even tell you how much alcohol is in this shit. 4.1%, huh? Look at that. So 4.1%, beautiful craft beer, just a nice light, goes down easy in dozens of quantity, that type of thing at 5-6 a.m. on a Saturday. Really goes down great. Yeah. So that's what we drink around here is the Busch Light.
Very nice. Now, have you had the peach version of that?
I have not yet. I'm a big fan of peach stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They replaced the apple with the peach. I liked the apple. I have not yet tried the peach. I would like to try the peach. I've heard mixed reviews about it. But I also am pretty sure that most people don't like peach stuff as much as I like peach stuff. So, I'm reserving my judgment until I get a chance to try it yet.
I had one this weekend. It is not anything like a Busch Light, and if you're a fan of peach, you should try the beer. It just doesn't taste like Busch Light to me. It's very peachy, quite refreshing. If you're hanging out by the pool or some body of water, it's probably the beer for you.
There you go. Body of water. What the hell is that? It hasn't rained here in a month and a half. So
it's not. It's supposed to rain all week here in Cincinnati. It started yesterday, and I don't think it's supposed to let up until the weekend.
I have not mowed my lawn in 6 weeks because it has not rained.
Okay.
It looks like dried hay out there.
I hear you. Talking of beer, Levi, one of the first things I like to ask our new conference mates here is, I'm trying to get a better idea of the landscape of beer around the Big 12. Next week's Cincinnati's NIL collective launches Cincy Lite, which we're all really looking forward to. Does Iowa State have their own beer yet, or have they partnered with a brewery to make that happen?
There is not one currently. I do know that there is at least I think there's a beer, a whiskey, a vodka, and a rum in the works.
Okay.
I think there's beer plus spirits in the works. None of them have been announced yet. From what I understand, I think the beer's coming out first and then the spirits later. I'm not sure exactly what. Whatever it is, I'm sure we'll buy it in droves. And to me, There's been much discussion about what it should be. I mean, there's the Cardinal and Gold Ale or something, the Cardinal and Golden Ale or something like that. You could go with that. There's a lots of different options for what you can call it and all this. But, what I can tell you is that whatever it is, it needs to be easy to drink, and it needs to be something that you can have quantities of and still be fine. Like the unanimous opinion is if they make an IPA or some shit out of this, like. No, can I swear on your podcast?
Sure, absolutely.
Fuck yeah! All right, let's do it. So if they make some fucking stupid ass IPA or some shit where you can only have like 3 of them and then you're just done. Like, no, I'm sorry, I'm not. I'm gonna stick with the Busch Light. However, if you make a nice, easy to drink, Golden Ale, Pale Ale, or something that's really easy to drink and you can pound a lot of them, that's the ticket. Iowa State fans love drinking easy to drink beer in humongous quantities, and it makes all the sense in the world. If they basically made something like if they made a substitute for Busch Light and made that the NIL beer, they would sell outrageous amounts of it and it would be perfect. I don't know why you would try. There's no reason to get cute with it here. Don't make an IPA. Don't make some like some other crazy shit. Don't make it a sour. Don't do any of that. Like, I like sours. I'm not as big on IPAs because I'm not a psychopath. But don't make it some weird shit or whatever. Make it a nice, easy to drink beer, that one that you can pick up a 30-pack of and just slam that shit at a tailgate. That's the kind of beer that an Iowa State beer should be, because that's the kind of beer Iowa State fans drink.
Absolutely. I think that's the same thought process that they were going there with Cincy Light. It's going to be a light lager. It's released next Thursday at noon, and I plan on being like one of the first people possible at the brewery to see if I can't drink as much as possible for a little while there.
What brewery is it from?
It's from Rheingeist.
Okay, no, that's the one that because I lived in Cincinnati for a little while, and Rheingeist was probably my most frequented.
Yeah, it's the biggest one in the city by I think if you take like the next 4 or 5 and add their production together, I don't think they still get what Rheingeist does. So, super excited for that. So tell us, we'll be on the lookout for the Iowa State beer when that comes down the line here. But let's stay on that same subject. If Bearcats fans are visiting Ames, and I don't think we have you away on the football schedule this year. I think you guys come to Cincinnati.
We're going to Nippert. Yep.
Yeah, but there's always basketball season, right? I'm sure that'll. But so if you're
finally reviving that home and home, which was a fantastic home and home is about 5 years ago now.
Yes, it was for sure.
Outstanding home and home series between Iowa State and Cincinnati. That was good. And that actually we played the game in Ames happened while I was living in Cincinnati.
Oh, nice.
And I was watching it with a cousin of mine who went to Cincinnati. So. Yeah,
that was probably quite the experience for you then.
Oh, that was fun because that was when Nader hit the corner 3 and we ended up winning that game at the buzzer. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. So give us some restaurant, bar, or brewery recommendations.
Yeah, there's a few really good breweries in the area. Torrent, Alluvial, both very, very good. They make really they're smaller. They don't have like big national distribution or anything like that. But Torrent and Alluvial both have good beer. You can kind of branch out a little bit more. Des Moines got a handful of them. Do not go to Exile, not because they make bad beer, but because they are University of Iowa supporters, and we don't.
I see.
We don't jive with that.
Fair enough.
But yeah, so it's a Torrent and Alluvial are both based out of Ames. They're both very, very good. Definitely recommend either of those two.
Very nice.
As far as bars go, there's a ton of them around. You can go to, if you want more of the college bar scene, you can go to Welch Ave. There's that's the college bars. And if you want kind of the adult bars, there's Main Street there. It's got London Underground, Whiskey River, stuff like that. There's Torrent is up there, Boulder Tap House. There's a ton of them. I mean, this is the upper Midwest. So if you turn around and point, you're going to find a bar.
So let me talk to me a little bit about Wide Right and Natty Lite. So how did you get involved with that? Are you the originator of it? Tell us the story about that.
I took over as the managing editor, the person in charge. I took over in August of 2017. So this is my 6th year doing it, or almost 7, approaching my 7th. And it started as a site back in 2000. Well, it's 13 back in 2010 because we turned 13 this year. So in 2010. So I'm actually the third managing editor of the site, but I am currently the longest tenured one in the site's history. So it started in 2010, just an independent site, and then got picked up by SB Nation like in 2015. I want to say 2015 or 2016. So that's kind of where it came from. If you're wondering about the name, so it's referencing two separate incidents. So to understand it, you first have to understand that this is a very part of our humor is like self-deprecation and stuff like that, and we write satire a lot. Maybe not quite as much as we used to, but we still do satire, more satire than any of the other. Well, we do satire, which is unlike the other SB Nation blogs. We are the only one, to my knowledge, we're the only one that actually allowed to do satire.
Okay.
But so we still do that stuff. So we tend to try to keep it light. And Wide Right and Natty Lights, they reference two different instances where Iowa State fell on our face a little bit. Two kind of shameful moments. The Wide Right part of it is in 2000. I think it's 2005 or 2005 and 2006 or 2006 and 2007. One of those two, that Iowa State had 2 years in a row had a chance to win the Big 12 North by kicking a field goal, and they missed them wide right both times. And the Natty Lite is the now infamous situation back in 2003 when Larry Eustace, our basketball coach, was found partying at a sorority in Columbia, Missouri after a game, and there's a photo of him taken with him drinking with the college girls or something like that, and then immediately got fired, and then Iowa State basketball kind of dipped for about a decade or whatever. So, and that was after probably the best teams in school history, right at the end, with Marcus Fizer and Jamal Tinsley and all those. If any of your older fans would probably remember that team, remember those teams. They lost in the Elite Eight to Michigan State and some bullshit, because they played the game at the Palace of Auburn Hills against Michigan State in the Elite Eight. That's garbage.
That's tough.
That's garbage. But anyway, so so that's where the name came from, is a couple of shameful incidents that we just remember and just say, hey, you know what, we've moved on, kind of.
When I first started following the account, which has been probably at least since it was announced that Cincinnati was going to the Big 12, I always just assumed, I was like, man, I bet there's some sort of deep pain that is associated with this
deep,
name.
yes.
Yeah. And it's just sort of playing off of that. So that's good to hear. Good to finally understand the name of it there. Yeah. As we talk about as Cincinnati, not only Cincinnati, but the other schools coming to the Big 12 as well. What do you think the Iowa State fan base, what was the reaction to Cincinnati, Houston, Central Florida, and BYU coming over to the Big 12?
I would say that the greatest portion of the reaction to that was just kind of a big exhale and say, okay, the Big 12 is stable for the foreseeable future. We're not because the Big 12 has spent over more than the last decade. Every damn offseason, it's what's going to happen? They're going to leave. The whole thing's going to fall apart. And just to be totally honest, if the Big 12 fell apart and everyone had to find a new landing spot, Iowa State would probably have a little bit of a trouble finding a spot in a Power 5 conference. Maybe they get, there was some talk, a couple years ago when all this first started happening, when Texas and Oklahoma were announced the SEC, and we were like, okay, what happens if the Big 12 falls apart? Where there was some talk that, Iowa State and Kansas might go to the Big 10 or something like that, because Iowa State isn't right in Big 10 territory, so theoretically goes there. But we've been worried for over a decade now, okay, what happens if the Big 12 falls apart? Because if you fall from the Power 5 back to the G5, you're done.
It sucks.
It's just you can't really deal with that. And it's not like, fortunately, a school like Cincinnati is sitting in the middle of a very fertile recruiting ground. They can get talented rosters and kind of just stay really competitive and maybe go undefeated and get to a playoff as a G5 or something like that. Iowa State does not have the luxury of sitting in a hotbed of recruiting. So if they are not in a Power 5 conference, it's gonna go downhill fairly quickly. So knowing that when we heard that those four schools are coming in, and the Big 12 is going to be stabilized as a Power 5 conference, maybe as a clear third or fourth place or whatever you want to call it to after the SEC and the Big Ten. Then, after that, the next three are just kind of whatever after that. I would say the Pac-12 is probably clearly behind the ACC and the Big 12. But, and you could probably argue that the Big 12 is a fairly solid third place right now, especially with how unstable the ACC appears to be. So knowing that it's stable, we're going to be in a Power 5 for the foreseeable future, that was the biggest sigh of relief. Specific to the schools, Cincinnati was the one I was personally excited about because, like I said, I lived out there. I have family members that went there. I have my own personal connections to Cincinnati, so I was glad to see that. I'm a big Skyline chili guy. We can talk about that later. I fucking love Cincinnati chili, which is I might be the only one outside of Ohio that can say that, but I love that shit. Last time I was out there, I took I know it's not the same, but I grabbed a couple cans of just a couple of the cans of it just to have it. Whatever. But anyways, I mean, UCF could not possibly more indifferent about that. I don't care about UCF. Houston is barely even on my, I barely recognize that they exist. They're even less on my radar than UCF. At least I can recognize that UCF's a good football program. I do not give two shits about Houston. I don't care. BYU is an interesting one because it's got name recognition. It's kind of just an interesting thing because they were independent for a while and they're out west. It's an interesting thing. I'll be the hilarious part is they're making Iowa State fans go out to BYU this first season, which could not be a bigger culture shock because, it's BYU. It's a bunch of Mormons that you can't even drink on site. You can't tailgate or any of that shit. Compared to Iowa State, which is tailgating and drinking beer is our thing. That's what we do better than just about anybody else. And now we got to go out there and just freaking wing it when we're out in Provo trying to do something. I don't know why they made us do that, but whatever.
It'll be interesting.
So BYU is an interesting thing. But Cincinnati, I think, brings the most value all around as of the four. I think Cincinnati brings the most value. Especially it's a nice partner for West Virginia, so they're not completely on an island by themselves. Iowa State likes to recruit Ohio quite a bit, so that gets for specific to Iowa State, that gets more eyes on us in Ohio. We've pulled some very good players out of Ohio, including Dave Montgomery and Deshaunte Jones and stuff like that. And, both of them from Cincinnati. Pulled some really good names out of there. And Mike Rose is another one from Ohio. We would like to continue to pull because Mike Campbell's an Ohio guy, so he wants to continue to pull out there. So us being able to play in Cincinnati is a great resource for Iowa State when we want to go recruit guys in Ohio and say, hey, you're going to be in front of your family and friends, every couple of years or something like that. I'm assuming Iowa State and Cincinnati will probably play most years just because we're a pretty good geographic partner. We would be your second closest team outside of West Virginia. So I would assume that Cincinnati and Iowa State will probably play pretty frequently. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of really what it is. I think that Cincinnati brings good value, specifically to Iowa State. Houston, I don't give a shit about. UCF give slightly more, but mostly no shits about. BYU is just kind of interesting. Just kind of a fun name to throw in there, I guess. But
sure. So tell me what your initial reactions were and sort of what your reactions are now, your opinions of Commissioner Brett Yormark.
I think there's something I can tell you there's a lot. He's just kind of throwing stuff at the wall, see what sticks, see what works and stuff like that. Because one thing I think he gets, so I think he understands that the Big 12 has to try to be a little bit different. They have to try to do if they try to play the SEC and the Big Ten's game, they're always going to be behind. They're always going to be dragging behind and trying to play catch up. The more that the Big 12 can be creative and innovative and aggressive about trying to expand their brand, that's better. And I think he understands that. There are some things a great example is when I first heard the news that the Big 12 was going to try to play games in Mexico, I was like, yeah, okay, I guess. I mean, it's kind of dumb. It seems kind of a waste. But they said, well, it's going to be a bowl game. That's different. If you want to play a bowl game in Mexico, that's cool. Play one in Mexico City, that'd be fun, or whatever. Or I don't know where else you would play, Monterey or something like that. Play a bowl game in Mexico, great. That's a good destination. The Bahamas Bowl sounds way cooler than it actually is because it's the Bahamas. If they had a cool stadium and they actually brought good teams to the Bahamas Bowl would be a pretty fun time. Same way with the Hawaii Bowl or whatever it is, even though you'll pretty much always play Hawaii. Bowl games in fun locations are fun, and fan bases like Iowa State and Cincinnati, where it's cold during the winter, they'll travel to, they'll go to Mexico, they'll go to Monterey to watch their team in a bowl game or something like that. That'd be fun. It's an inventive idea to get their, to get the name out there. Is the Big 12 gonna pick up a bunch of new fans in Mexico because they play a bowl game? I don't know, but probably not a ton, but maybe it pays off and it's great. But it's being inventive. It's doing something different. And suppose there's this new conference rebranding that we're supposed to be hearing about here for fairly soon. About I don't know if they're going to change the logo or what what the whole, I don't know what that all encompasses. I don't think anybody knows exactly what that all encompasses just yet. But stuff like that I think is what needs to happen. He's introduced new energy to the conference that it hasn't had in a while. Because like Bob Bowlesby I think he kind of did his best with what he could do, and he certainly went down swinging. But just throwing all sorts of punches at Oklahoma and Texas, saying they conspired to take down the conference and all this or whatever. Doing all he went down swinging, but in the end he was kind of a dinosaur. He needed he just wasn't on top of things as far as trying to really expand and strengthen the Big 12. And that's what they need. They needed a new fresh face, and I think he's done a pretty good job so far. We still got to see how this all pays off long term, and just see kind of how, especially like when this media rights deal ends in 2031, whatever it is, when this deal ends, what does it look like from there? Where's the Big 12 from now? Because like UCF and Cincinnati are theoretically, and all four of these are theoretically long-term plays, especially Cincinnati and UCF that probably have the most room for growth, partially because UCF has a fucking huge alumni base because they have like 60,000 enrollment or something like that. And Cincinnati obviously has a chance to be really get a nice competitive boost because, theoretically they can, maybe they can steal one or two more Ohio State commits out of Ohio and strengthen teams, stuff like that, where they can theoretically have a stronger roster because they're playing Power 5 football and they're already in a strong recruiting ground. So, those two schools especially, but Houston, BYU too are long-term plays to say right now. Do they add a ton of value? I don't know, but they don't detract from the value, but really what they are is a potential long-term play where then they are adding to the value of the conference because they're growing and they're getting a bigger brand. They're becoming more successful, making more playoff appearances and things like that.
So I kind of want to one thing I was really interested to learn about, and unfortunately to my dismay, I understand that the Big 12 doesn't have a ton of these, but what I was really anxious to learn about was like the trophy games for football.
Yeah.
UC used to be a part of a ton of trophy games with Pitt and Louisville, of course. We still have Miami, Ohio that we've beat like 38 times in a row or whatever it is now, but one that's maybe the best one in the conference now, or maybe it has been all along and we just didn't give it enough credit. Tell us more about Farmageddon.
So Farmageddon is technically not a trophy game because there is not technically an official trophy for it, but it is a named rivalry game at this point. It
should be though, right? Like
we've been campaigning for a while. There's tons of good ideas, whether you exchange an old single row plow, or if you really want to go over the top, you buy an old Farmall and paint it half red, half purple, and whoever wins the game takes it home type of thing. There's lots of great things you could do with Farmageddon. But
so for listeners who aren't familiar with that, let me. So Farmageddon is the series that's dated back to 1917 between Iowa State and Kansas State. So
I think it's actually before that. I think
was it. So this is just
they played first in like 1904.
Okay, maybe this is consecutively. This is what a quick internet search got me.
There was a 1 year break early on for World War I, maybe.
Okay. Because
game. Maybe it was 1970. I thought they played a few times before that, but anyways.
So it's the eighth longest continuous series in college football, and the longest never interrupted series in college football is what I found earlier today. So just sort of give us one, why does Iowa have better corn than Kansas? Maybe start off with that, and tell us what that rivalry is like in the Big 12.
Well, I can tell you Iowa has better corn than Kansas because Kansas doesn't grow corn.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, Kansas doesn't grow corn. And I mean, I guess they do have a little bit of, but it's not even close. I mean, Kansas grows wheat, so it's really not a who grows better corn situation. It's
I see.
Iowa grows corn, Kansas grows wheat.
I
so
see.
is it
Okay.
corn or wheat that's better, and clearly corn is more useful. But so Kansas State and Iowa State are both land grant schools that have been around for a long time. They both have very similar things they're good at. Ag schools, engineering schools, things like that. Manhattan and Ames are very similar. I mean, they are functionally the same school. I would say it's maybe slightly more prestigious academically outside of agriculture, but it's not a big gap or anything like that. I mean, they're functionally identical schools with very, very similar fan bases that are rowdy Midwesterners that that fervently support their teams. Things like they're just so similar that you can't help but have a rivalry, basically. And that's just kind of where it comes from. It was a friendly rivalry for a long time. The last 5 years, it's gotten a lot less friendly.
Okay.
It's gotten a lot more heated. Because for a long time, Iowa State dominated the rivalry. Up until Bill Snyder took over, Iowa State dominated the rivalry. And then Kansas State dominated the rivalry under Bill Snyder, and then now Iowa State's won 3 of the last 5 and had won 3 of 4. They only lost by 1 point last year, though. So they've won 3 of the last 5. So it's kind of evened up, and Kansas State fans have not gotten very sensitive because they were, for the last 20 years or so, they kind of stomped on Iowa State quite a bit, and they got pretty cocky, and all of a sudden, now Matt Campbell can beat Kansas State fairly frequently, and now they're getting sensitive about it. So
okay. Very nice. So, compare that to the in-state rivalry with Iowa. What is that? Why is that different?
That is unmitigated pure hatred. It's too
okay.
So Iowa is a medical and liberal arts college. I mean, there is a philosophical political divide between the two, where you've got Iowa State is a land grant, engineering, agricultural. They kick out lots of blue collar workers, and even engineers and ag guys are still more blue collary than doctors and lawyers and writers. So there is a cultural divide between the two schools. It's one of those things. Iowa State and Iowa fans do not get along. They can coexist in the same house, but it's usually if it's not the person you're married to, you're probably not getting along with the other side at all. It's an actual legitimate cannot stand the other side thing. Nobody cheers for the other side just because it's the state of Iowa and all that. No, fuck them. Last year when Caitlin Clark, this year when Caitlin Clark was doing her thing and she did the Final Four, nope, actively cheering against her every step of the way. I don't care if she's good for the women's game. Nope, I absolutely will not. I will not cheer for Caitlin Clark or the University of Iowa in any capacity ever for any reason. Not going to happen. I don't care. I don't care if it's good for the university or for the state of Iowa. Fuck them. I don't care. I'm not cheering for Iowa. And just like you guys would never ever in your million years cheer for Ohio State.
No, or Xavier. That's sort of
maybe Xavier's a better one. Yeah.
Ohio State, they don't like to play us that often.
Sure, yeah. So Xavier, you guys would never in a million years say, "Oh, it's good for the state of Ohio." La la. No, shut the fuck. No, fuck them.
No,
we're not doing that. Yeah, we're not doing any of that. So that is pure unmitigated hatred based on a cultural divide that goes back well over a century. I mean, it was it's for a long time. You can read stories from 80 years ago of people in this rivalry saying they can't stand the other side because the lawyers and doctors from Iowa were always looking down and being snooty towards the farmers and engineers coming out of Iowa State and stuff like that. And it's all this. I mean, the deep hatred goes back a long time. Because they didn't play for a long time. They played, I want to say up into the 30s or the 40s or something like that. Then they didn't play for 20 years or 30 years. They resumed it in the 70s. Partially because Iowa State was very good in the 50s and Iowa was poopy. And they just would not play Iowa State for 2 decades. And then now we're going to start playing as soon as Iowa State's not good anymore. And then just since then, it's been a very, very heated. There's a lot of fervor to that rivalry. It's an underrated one as far as just pure hatred for the other fan base. You
Hell
hear
yeah,
about,
I love it.
Like Alabama, Auburn, and things like that. The big ones you always hear about. There's big rivalries too that you hear about Notre Dame and USC or something like that. It's like, yeah, it's a rivalry, but they're all I mean, I don't really see it much as like that's. I don't see that having the same kind of heat or something like that. Like Michigan, Ohio State, or something like that. Like, as far as just pure hatred for the other fan base, Iowa State is absolutely in the same category as the Iron Bowl, Michigan, Ohio State, all that same category. Just not. No. So Kansas State, there at least was some level of friendliness at some point in time, and there's just a lot of similarities. And when we're not playing each other, we kind of have to be on the same team a little bit because we're in the Big 12. We kind of got to fight for it a little bit. We have to stick together to a certain extent. Iowa, no. Jump off a bridge. I don't care.
I'll take it. So, talking about the Big 12 and having to stick together. So if you, there's, plenty of rumors of Big 12 expansion on the horizon. Whether, could be tomorrow. Who knows?
Yeah.
Do you have a preference or a power ranking of who you'd like to see the Big 12 add if they do expand?
The first and obvious choice is Colorado. They were in the Big 12 before. They made a huge mistake by leaving the first time, and they know it. They've lost out on something like $60 million in media money since they left. They should probably come back and be in the conference, especially now that BYU's there. They've got a really good travel partner.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's never going to happen, but honestly, Nebraska should probably move back. The Big Ten thing has not worked out for them at all. And
not in terms of wins and losses. Nope.
I don't know if the Big 12 thing would. I don't know. I still don't think Big Nebraska would ever return to what they were even in the Big 12. But like, they're in like the Big 10 West is a horrible division. Like there's no good teams in the Big. Like look, Wisconsin is generally pretty good, but they also kind of fall on their face all the time. Iowa's and there's just the rest of that conference is garbage. And they still cannot find a way to even like win that division. So, Nebraska probably should come back. They're a better fit for the Big 12. I don't know. They should probably come back. But assuming that's not going to happen, Colorado, the four corner schools make the most sense. Colorado, Arizona, Arizona State, Utah. Those are the ones that make sense. Utah fans would drive me fucking up the wall, but it's okay. I've interacted with them like 3 times on Twitter, and it's been a miserable experience all 3 times. Horrible. Iowa fans and Kansas State fans are just god-awful online. I would take both of them over Utah. I'm not even kidding. They're horrendous. But Arizona State fans, I've interacted with a bunch of them. They seem pretty cool. They seem like they'd be fun. Colorado fans already know what's up. I think those are definitely the top 4 for sure. No question about it. I don't really see anybody out like east of the Mississippi that really trips my trigger much. Memphis doesn't really do it for me. I don't think they add much. USF that's not even an option. I'm not sure why anybody even floated that one. South Florida. They were good one year.
They floated that idea.
Yeah, they floated that idea.
Yeah.
South Florida is not happening. I don't want it to happen. That's a stupid. If the ACC blows up, going and getting a Louisville would be really good. Louisville would be good. NC State would be a good one. There's a few ACC schools that would probably fit pretty well, and make for really nice additions. But we got to kind of see what happens there because they're kind of stuck for like 15 years.
Right. Yeah.
So, that's probably I would say those 4 corner schools would be my first 4. But if we just took Colorado, Arizona, and Arizona State, that'd be fine. Utah can go back to Mountain West for all I give a shit.
So tell me, let's shift into like specific sports.
There's an Oregon State fan that was talking shit like this.
Oregon State,
like get the fuck out of here. Like
no,
you guys are gonna slide into the ocean before you get back into a Power 5 conference. Like what are we doing here?
Yeah. Tell us about Jack Trice Stadium. What is game day like in Ames? Sort of, take us through a day of a fan going to the game.
Yeah, Jack Trice Stadium is a fantastic event. By the time Cincinnati plays here, which I don't know if they'll play here next year or not, but Jack Trice Stadium is just a great place to watch a college football game. There isn't a bad seat in the house. It's just, man, I love. Obviously, I'm biased. I love the stadium. It was built in the 70s. There are like renovations it needs. Like it needs a new press box. They need to renovate the concessions and stuff like that. Like it shows like it's a 1970s era stadium, but honestly, it's a great stadium. It's loud. They're always working on it and building on renovating stuff. The tailgating is the best in the Big 12. It just is. I've been to a few, I guess I haven't been to a ton of the road games in the Big 12, but lots of people that I keep talking to say, oh, this place is fun. This place is fun. Like Kansas State, I've heard is fun, but it's not quite as packed and hopping quite as Iowa State is or whatever. And like Texas Tech is decent or whatever, but they're just kind of spread out. TCU is pockets. They're good or whatever. Texas is like a nothing. Iowa State is probably the best overall tailgating experience in the Big 12. There's tons of people. If Cincinnati fans are there and as long as you're cool, we're cool type of thing. Like that's just kind of how it is. If you show up now being a bunch of dickheads, that's what you're going to get treated like, a bunch of dickheads. But, if you're showing up and you're being cool, you're whatever, Iowa State fans are more than happy to lend beer to away fans. Or do that. Right now they're building what's called Town. It's this huge development structure that's stretching between Jack Trice and Hilton Coliseum. That's going to be this whole big thing. There'll be a brewery, the hotel and stuff like that. This whole like entertainment district type of thing.
Okay.
It's meant to basically replicate Kansas City's Power and Light district. Something it's meant to be similar to that or a similar type of thing to that. They're building that. That won't be done for probably 3 or 4, I think 4 years maybe, something like that. But even while that's under construction, though, it's still a fabulous tailgating experience. It's a fun time. I would absolutely recommend making the trip to Ames if you're a Cincinnati fan.
So I put out this graphic earlier today on social media, sort of just going through the history of the Bearcats records against the schedule this year. And I was surprised that UC has never played Iowa State in football. You bring up the basketball series that we had, the home and home a couple or 5 or 6 years ago, whenever that was. But in football, they've never played each other. And I think you also bring up where you guys will be the next closest school to us, next to West Virginia. I think there's a lot of potential here for this series to be a lot of fun in the near future.
This was now I don't mean to like pour salt in the wound or anything. One of the reasons I was also really looking forward to Cincinnati coming was when you guys had Luke Fickell, and it was going to be a yearly Matt Campbell Luke Fickell battle.
Yes,
that would have been a really awesome thing. Even though that's not going to happen, obviously, it's still a really cool thing. I think there's a lot of opportunity for this to be a good budding rivalry. One of the ones that's been it's a rivalry that's been building over, especially over the last 10 years or so, is Iowa State and Oklahoma State. There's not like any hatred. That's another very similar school, ag school, engineering school, stuff like that. They've played a ton of close games recently. There's a lot of good. There's not really hatred there at all, but there's just a lot of really, really good intensity to those games. Those games always feel super, super important. Even if one of the team or the other isn't really great, those games always feel really important because we like to play Oklahoma State. Cincinnati, I think, has a potential to be that kind of opponent there. I don't think they'll ever, like I've seen Cincinnati fans will ever like have a hatred for each other or anything like that. But if they keep playing close games early on, they play really intense games early on. That's a great way to make the future meetings feel really important.
For sure. So correct me if I'm wrong. I think Iowa State was 4-8 last season. Took a little bit of a dive there last year. But what's sort of the outlook for this year headed into 23?
Yeah, right now this is a year of change. It is. Last year was a rebuilding year a lot because you lose Brock Purdy and Breece Hall and Charlie Kohler and Chase Allen, which are all 4 of them are NFL guys. Breece Hall was going to be the rookie of the year in the NFL before he tore his ACL. Brock Purdy obviously had his run at the end of this past season, and now he's probably going to be the 49er starter. And Charlie Kohler and Chase Allen, both NFL guys. It's a lot of talent to lose on that side of the ball. And they had to replace a lot with a new quarterback, new tight ends. They still had Xavier Hutchinson, which was good, but the offensive line lost a few pieces, and they struggled quite a bit. And there was a lot of growing pains. But there was also some things that they identified that just weren't working. They made a ton of staff changes this past offseason. They got rid of offensive coordinator Tom Manning, and they got rid of offensive line coach Jeff Myers. Joe Gordon, the quarterbacks coach, left. Matt Capone, the cornerbacks coach, left. That wasn't really due to because the cornerbacks were bad. I think he just got a different opportunity. And Nate Scheelhaas, who was the running backs and receivers coach, is now the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach. If you remember Nate Shieldhaas, he was a really, really fun quarterback at Illinois back in the late 2000s. Really, really fun dual threat guy. The thought is that he's going to be a more aggressive play caller than Tom Manning was. Schematically, they'll probably be fairly same. I don't know how much Iowa State you guys, have, Cincinnati fans have watched. Probably not a lot since you had no reason to. But Iowa State runs a lot of heavy sets, 2 and 3 tight ends, things like that. But they're kind of like Iowa, but a lot more creatively. They'll run 2 and 3 tight end sets out of the shotgun, and they'll move them around. Iowa State has lots and lots of pre-snap motion. It drives me fucking nuts. I hate it. But they do it, and they move their tight ends around a lot. They use them out wide as like H-back blockers. They'll slip them out into the seams. They'll do all sorts of crazy shit with the tight ends, and then a kind of a power running game. But we're gonna see because what the quarterback situations look like next year. Hunter Deckers has lots of raw ability, but he struggled last year quite a bit. Whether that was just him or it was the receivers or it was the offensive line, it's a combination of all three, or the play calling, whatever it was. He struggled. If he continues to struggle, there's J.J. Cole right behind him, he's a true freshman, but he is the second highest rated recruit in program history. And all of the early returns are very, very good. He's like 6'5", got a huge arm. He's mobile enough, but he's a more of a pocket passer, big time arm, really, really talented kid. And if Hunter Deckers isn't performing well, I wouldn't be surprised to see J.J. Cole take over at some point. But he's a freshman quarterback still, so you expect some things. But by far the biggest change that happened in the offseason, and besides the strength and conditioning coach, was the offensive line coach, which now you definitely won't know anything about this, but well, you guys know about like North Dakota State, like how don't ever play North Dakota State because you're going to hate it. There's another school called Northern Iowa that you do not want to play ever for any reason. UNI is in the same category as North Dakota State as a team you should never ever schedule because they will beat you and you'll hate it all the time. And part of the reason they will do that is because they always had really good offensive lines. So we said, fuck them, we're going to take their offensive line coach, and we did. And his name is Ryan Clan. He played at Oregon, was a really good lineman there. And then he was at UNI for a few years, did an excellent job there. And then now we've got him. It's a total philosophy change on the offensive line where, to be frank, they were pretty soft under Jeff Myers. They got pushed around quite a bit. They were technique-wise, they didn't develop very well. Ryan Clanton from day one, if you watch their mic'd up videos that the social media team has been putting out, it's violence. They're going to go out and start punching people in the face. Like now we're at the point where it's like, if I don't see like at least one unnecessary roughness call on an offensive lineman per game, we're not doing something right, type of thing. Like they're going to be like, I would say, like they may not, who knows how good they're going to be, how sound they're going to be, but I would say linemen are going to go be out there trying to beat the shit out of somebody. And it's going to be, and that's what Iowa State needs to do because they like to run power running games and stuff like that. You have to have a really physical offensive line to do that. And if the offensive line can take a step forward and be good in pass protection and really open up some holes in the run game, that makes the job way easier for the offensive coordinator, for the quarterback, for the running backs, for the receivers. It makes everybody's job way easier when the offensive line is performing well. If the offensive line takes a step forward, the offense is going to be a lot better than it was last year because it really couldn't be worse. And that's kind of where we're at right now. It kind of hinges on the offensive line at least making some strides forward. J.J. Cole is a plenty talented quarterback to be good if the offensive line is solid. That's a lot of what this hinges on right now is the offensive line.
Let's sort of let's fast forward a little bit here to the winter time. So I'm very excited to go through the gauntlet of Big 12 basketball this year. It is. I mean, it's.
Oh my God.
It's just punishment. I know, but it's just punishment.
So much.
It is. I mean, a gauntlet at this point, I think, is an understatement. Tell us about Hilton Coliseum. If Bearcats fans or listeners too young to remember or don't remember that far back to the home and home that we had, give us what a night at Hilton is like.
The best way I can describe this is, Fran Fraschilla, probably one of the most respected minds in college basketball. When he ranks his best home court advantages in college basketball, he says Allen Fieldhouse at Kansas is 1A and Hilton Coliseum is 1B. Period. Those two, when they are loud and rocking, are the two hardest places to play a college basketball game in America. Period. They just are. Hilton is extraordinarily loud because all the sound reflects off the ceiling straight back to the basketball court. and there's 15,000 people in there, and it's loud and it's very hard to play. And Iowa State right now plays a brand of basketball that is heavy defense. It's a very defense heavy. I mean, everybody in the Big 12 plays a defense heavy style brand of basketball where it's super, super physical. And honestly, I'm just to be straight with you. I mean, the four new teams coming in are probably going to have a very tough adjustment period. They're used to coming out of a different conference where it's not a UFC match every time you step on the court.
Mm-hmm.
Big 12 basketball, you have to be ready to play physical, more physical than you've ever seen. You're probably going to get really pissed off that there's a bunch of shit not getting called, because that's like we're getting pretty close to no blood, no foul into the Big 12, and that's just kind of what it is. And obviously the story all of last year was how good the Big 12 was, just because every team was good. Just about every team probably deserved to make the NCAA tournament. They probably would have won a game or two. And how big the gap was between the Big 12 and, even the Big 10 or the ACC or whoever was second place, probably the Big 10, I suppose. And then all that happened in the offseason was every meaningful transfer went straight to the Big 12. That's all that happened. All of the good transfer players that you can think of, they went to the Big 12. Every one of them. And now the conference is just outrageous and going to be very unpleasant. Like, honestly, the 4 seed, the fourth seed coming into the conference tournament is probably going to be like 10-8. Like, it's going to be a fucking nightmare. Everybody's going to hate it. It's going to be really fun, but like, I do think that the 4 new schools are probably going to struggle a little bit just because of just how good the Big 12 is and how physical it is. It's just a different game. It's like, I was thinking about this today. I believe that like the gap between the Big 12 and every other conference in basketball is maybe even a significantly larger gap than there is between SEC and all of the other conferences in football. Where the SEC is like, it's definitely the best football conference. How much better it is than the other ones is always kind of up for debate. There is no question about it that the Big 12 is the best conference for basketball. That is where the best Big 12. That's where the best basketball in college in the NCAA is played, is in the Big 12, and it's not even close. And the 2 best arenas in college basketball are in the Big 12, Allen Fieldhouse and Hilton Coliseum. Period. You guys, it's gonna be fun. You're gonna enjoy it, but you're also gonna hate the shit out of it. That's just what it's gonna be. Put it this way, Iowa State's going to be picked for a middle of the pack, probably middle of the conference this year, and they had the 11th ranked recruiting class, including a 5-star that was ranked number 12 overall, and they're going to be probably a middle of the pack team.
I think there's a lot of Bearcats fans, myself included, that kind of feel our football program had the momentum with Fickle here, going to the college football playoff, going undefeated. It felt like they had the momentum for a while, especially with the 2 years under our one basketball coach who shall not be named. But I think the momentum seems to be swinging it back in the basketball favor with Wes Miller and more of the transfers that you just talked about that he's brought in. So that has a lot of us excited. We're not going to win. The days of winning the American and winning 27 games. That's out the door.
Nope.
But you're
hope for 20.
Yes, hope for 20. But the nice thing is that when you lose a couple conference games, it's not to Temple and East Carolina. So they're actually quality losses, and that's.
I'm hoping right now. I'm just hoping. The shitty part is now, like, we brought in 4 programs. The worst one's UCF, and they've been in the NCAA tournament not that long ago. I mean, they're not a good basketball program, but that's another one where they're the long-term play, where UCF probably could, if they found the right coach, they probably could be good down the road. God, I hope if anybody's going to be a free win in the conference next year, it's going to be UCF.
Yeah.
But God, I hope they stay that way. Because right now, all we did was Houston was a top 5 team all last year. Cincinnati has historically been good, maybe a little bit down, but getting kind of, like you said, coming back up to being what they are. BYU is always a tough out. We have a BYU basketball beef. Because we played in Provo in 2014, and it was bad enough. Obviously, the fans around in Utah and the Salt Lake City area have a certain reputation for being not super friendly to certain types of people. And Melvin Edgum back then apparently was. Now you got to realize Melvin Edgum is the nicest dude ever born, and he's like solid gold-plated, perfect human being. He was pissed off enough where he gave the BYU fans a double bird in the middle of the game, and yeah. So we've got beef with BYU fans in basketball specifically. So it's one of those things that I'm looking forward to playing them, but. All we did was add three more really good basketball programs and one more that probably is going to be good at some point. Like, God damn it. And then they're talking about adding UConn and Gonzaga. Like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Like, can you even imagine this shit? Like, Texas and Oklahoma are leaving and the conference is going to get better by average. Like,
right. Hey, well, I've been on record, I think the last 3, maybe 4 episodes saying that if I never interact with a UConn fan again, I'll be all right. So this is,
you might not have to, you might not have a choice here fairly.
I know.
Because it sounds like they're going after UConn. I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see. Yeah.
I'm not a fan of the idea of a UConn ad. I'm not in on that. And I really hate the idea of adding Gonzaga. I think that's a nothing. I mean, unless they think that they at the next media deal that they can split off basketball and sell that as a separate product, which it sounds like that's maybe what they're going to try to do.
Interesting.
And they're like, just because the Big 12 basketball is so good, like,
yeah,
if you can split that off and make it its own media entity, you can probably maybe get more money as a sum of the parts type of thing by splitting off basketball and letting that be its own deal. And because, I mean, obviously you got Kansas to lead the way as the biggest brand there. I mean, they are the biggest brand in college basketball. And, football is still always going to be valuable just because it's football. But Big 12 basketball is so good that it's probably its contribution to the overall contract is probably being reduced because it is paired up with it. We're going to find out. Maybe they just decide that it's not worth it and they're just going to keep it together. But either way, I hate Gonzaga. I don't hate the school. I guess I don't like the idea of adding Gonzaga, and UConn's a weird fit for me. UConn doesn't do anything. I mean, the football program is garbage, and it's one of the worst in Division I. So I don't know.
Same. So Levi, I really only have 2 more questions here for you. The first one here is more open ended. So, is football, basketball being the top money getters, where all the eyeballs are, what's a third sport, or are there more than one that Iowa State fans really get up for or get excited about?
Oh, wrestling. State of Iowa.
Wrestling. Okay, that makes sense. Duh. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Iowa is the mecca of wrestling. Like, I mean, just period. The sport of wrestling revolves around the state of Iowa. Iowa and Iowa State are both historically very, very good programs. Probably the second and third best programs in NCAA history. Historically speaking, I guess maybe Penn State's probably moved up into the third spot, and Iowa State's probably fourth now, but it's only because of an Iowa State grad. And actually, Iowa's only there because of an Iowa State grad too. Iowa State has contributed the 2 best wrestlers to ever be on a mat, Cale Sanderson and Dan Gable. They're both Iowa State grads. They themselves made Iowa wrestling what it was and made Penn State wrestling what it is. Oklahoma State has the most national titles of any school of all time. They're the Big 12. Oklahoma has a few national titles. But they're actually, I think Oklahoma's staying in the Big 12 for wrestling. Don't quote me on that, but I think they're staying in the Big 12 for wrestling. So Big 12 is a good wrestling conference. That's probably third place is wrestling, just because it's Iowa. We wrestle.
Very nice. Yeah, I haven't heard that one yet on this series, so I like that. Switching it up a little bit here.
You'll probably hear that when if you like whoever you bring on for Oklahoma State, I'm sure they'll probably mention wrestling.
All right, very nice. Well, actually, I talk Marshall. I think Marshall did. He kind of lumped it in there with.
I guess Oklahoma State could say baseball or softball too. Their softball program is pretty good.
Yeah, he definitely talked about softball.
Who did you have for Oklahoma State?
Marshall Scott from Pistols Firing.
Okay. I mean, I know Pistols Firing. I don't know Marshall personally, but
yeah.
Okay. Anyways, softball is a big one there. Wrestling, I think their wrestling program's in a little bit of a lull right now, but historically, Oklahoma State wrestling is very, very good.
Nice.
But yeah.
All right.
Wrestling's probably third place for us.
All right. So last question here for you, really kind of a gambling question, if you will. I don't know if you. I don't know if you have sports betting in Iowa, if you. Okay. Very nice.
Our live stream is sponsored by a sports book in Iowa, actually. So
very nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so this not exactly a sports book, but this question is sponsored by the BetStamp app, which not only allows you to line shop so you can find the best odds across all sports books, it also tracks all your bets in one location across all sports books as well. So if you're like me, you use multiple ones, you use DraftKings, FanDuel, Caesars, what have you. You don't have to flip between the apps to find out how your bets are doing. So that is one of the biggest perks for me. Download it, the App Store, Google Play, and be sure to use the referral code GoBeercats. So if I give you Texas and TCU or the field to win the Big 12 in football this year, who are you taking?
Not TCU. I would say I can't pick Texas on principle. I'm going to say the field.
Going with the field.
I can't take Texas on principle, and I think TCU take at least a little step back. Certainly not going to be in the national championship game again. Right now, I would say my bet and money's. I hate to say this. This would make me sick to say this, but probably Kansas State. They've got
going for the repeat.
They've got a fairly friendly schedule, and they're probably going to be pretty decent. I could see a team like. I could see TCU making a run again. I'm going to say the field though. I don't think Oklahoma's got a shot at it. I think Brent Venables was not a good hire for them. I think they're going to be in rough shape when they get to the SEC. I think they're probably going to be. I think they're going to be scraping for bowl eligibility a lot of years because I don't think Brent Venables is the right guy at all for them. So we'll see. He's going to get fired probably.
Very nice. Levi, I certainly appreciate your time, man. If for Bearcats fans that want to see more of what you do, the account is on Twitter, Wide Right and Natty Lite. So we had the beer collaboration thing going here as well. Not the first one of those in this series, as maybe next week we have another beer pun collab as well. So Levi, we have, as long as nothing falls through, we will have Ears and Beers from West Virginia.
Interesting. Okay, yes. I haven't heard of them, so that's cool though.
Yeah,
we get along West Virginia. We have our Riot Bowl every year, so that's good.
That's another one. We need to get these trophy games going.
That one's got an unofficial trophy, which is a gas can with a bunch of letters glued onto it. Because Iowa State and West Virginia both have plenty of historical evidence that we like to burn things when things are going good. West Virginia likes to burn their couches. We like to burn dumpsters. It's just one of those things.
Great. Rather burn a dumpster than be a dumpster fire, I guess. So
it kind of is we've been both. It's fine.
Nice. All right, Levi, I appreciate it. I'll reach back out. I always like to do like game previews during the football season. So I know, like I said, you guys are coming to Nippert this year. So once we get into the season and actually have some snaps under, on film and able to see what the season is going to give us, we'll have you back on and we'll talk.
Sounds great.
All right, man. I'll see you.